Namo Buddhaya, Tashi Delek to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Tibet House for inviting me for this event, a very important event, 1989, when His Holiness got the Nobel Peace Prize. I think exactly 10 years later, in 1999, I was on assignment in a particular country where he was visiting, and I had the honor of receiving him and spending about 2 days with him. And thereafter, of course, many occasions to meet him. Feel blessed and feel highly honored to be present here to speak a few words on this occasion. Our chief guest, Ms. Tharlam Dolma Changra, Education Minister of the CTA, Professor Amarji Lochan of Delhi University, Venerable Geshe Damdulji, as always. Feel humbled being in your company and in your events. And of course, Venerable Professor Kaveri Gill. I think since the topic is on universal ethics, it's something which we need to probe into as to where do we stand today as far as universal ethics is concerned. It is very much the need of the hour, and as the world has progressed over ages, over centuries, the relevance and importance of universal ethics has increased. If we look back, philosophers, political scientists, people of different hues and background have done a lot of research, and a lot of effort has been put in to ensure that universal ethics become universal. Now, ethics, what do you mean by ethics? The word very simply means a compassionate world, a world where everyone is happy, satisfied, where interpersonal relations and interpersonal equations are based on positive notes, and the equation between human being and the environment and the surrounding is also based on a very positive, compassionate note, so that you live in a very happy society, a very satisfying society, without any suffering, without any pain. Now, this is increasingly becoming challenging and difficult as time goes by. We need to think about it. Why? As per His Holiness, when asked about universal ethics, he always says that it's a combination of compassion, forgiveness, compatibility, acceptance, self-discipline. Combination of these factors. One of the reasons why we have not been able to come to terms with implementing universal ethics is the difference in our culture, our tradition, our value systems, our understanding of life around us. If you go to Argentina, Brazil, and ask them to write 10 lines about ethics, and you go to Africa and you ask them to write 10 lines about ethics, you'll be surprised. They'll be completely contradictory and different, because it's driven by their culture, their tradition, their values. So how can you have something which is universal when there are differences of this nature across the globe? The other aspect is interests of countries. Ethics has a lot to do with how a country behaves. You could be in a country which is very intrusive, very aggressive. There are wars going on around. Now, if you ask the Russians, they'll say that, I'm ethically correct because I'm defending my nation. But in the process, he's killing people. If you ask the Ukrainians, they will say that, well, I'm defending my country against the Russians, so I'm also ethically correct. But there are flaws there also. So any situation, if you look at, there are the positives and the negatives. There are the good and the bad. The other aspect which is missing here is a solid international foundation or a body which can make people understand the value of ethics through deep-rooted social infusion and bring everybody on board. Now, this is a very big challenge. It's not easy to do. Finally, the last issue which bothers the process of universalizing ethics is perception. Perceptions vary. Just like I mentioned in Argentina and Brazil, like that, even if you come to a solid conclusion and you're about to arrive at a final decision, perceptions will always vary. There's a story which I always tend to narrate. Some of you might have heard it if you've attended some of our events. This is about what a very senior Rinpoche had mentioned. It's a small example of a mountain, a little mountain which has two villages on two sides. Now, one village is located on the side from where the sun rises, and the other village is located on the side where the sun sets. So the villagers who are on the eastern side, they call the mountain the Eastern Hill. They've named it as Eastern Hill because they've seen the sun rise. The ones who are living on the western side, they call it the Western Hill. The hill is the same, mountain is the same, but one village is calling it Eastern, the other is calling it Western. And they will not want to change their own respective positions, whatever you may do, because the Eastern Hill people, for hundreds and hundreds of years, their fathers, grandfathers have written stories, poetries, songs, musics about the Eastern Hill. School education is based on the Eastern Hill. There is an emblem called the Eastern Hill. Similarly, the situation is on the Western Hill. They are willing to go to war to prove that Eastern Hill is correct or Western Hill is correct. So this is where, in Buddha Dhamma, as we talk about the middle path, you pull out the relevant people from the Eastern and Western Hill and bring them to a neutral position, bring them to a middle place, and make them look at the mountain and make them understand why is he calling it the Eastern and why is it that you are calling it the Western. That is how you come to a middle path compromise. But the compromise is not so easy, because as you come to the point of compromise, there are going to be these negative factors which will crop up. Arrogance, ego, anxiety, stress, the baggage you are carrying from your ancestors, that no, this cannot be Western Hill, this is Eastern Hill, that kind of thing. So these are elements which are going to affect any decision towards universal ethics. How do we overcome these? It's not an easy task. You would think that in today's world, where we are, we call it the global world, we are integrated because of the wireless communication system, the internet, the social media, etc. Sitting in any part of the world, you can communicate with anyone, anywhere. If that is the ease of functioning, and if technology is advanced so much that at the press of a button you can get food at your doorstep, why is it difficult to then have universal ethics in place? But actually speaking, all these positive developments, so-called apparent positive developments in technology, in the cyberspace, has a lot of negativities. They don't come so easily and convenient. According to research, almost 30% of the material which you have on the social media is junk, is false, part of disinformation and misinformation which you are being fed. So you are living in an artificial world. Last year, Facebook in 2023 pulled out 1600 million false news items. 1600 million. Imagine the quantum of negative things which are floating around. So you are actually submerged in a world which is artificial, which is marred by falsification, false information. So how do you achieve universal ethics? I mean, absolutely, you're going the other way around. You're actually going behind times. So this is where Buddha Dhamma clearly specifies the Eightfold Path, which many of you know very clearly, repeatedly. Political scientists and others have found that the core value exists there. The right vision, the right insight, the right action, the right speech, the right livelihood, the right mindfulness, the right concentration. Now all of these factors, I don't want to define each one of them, they have a critical role to play in ethics and ethical values. If you string them together in a form of interconnectedness, which is known as Paticca Samapuda, interconnectedness, it forms a very strong holistic value system for reaching universal ethics. But how do you convince people? How do you tell them about this? See, there are two platforms through which an average man would think that I can bring the world together. One is through ideology. Have an ideological movement. It can be very strong. The Soviet Russia, which existed for so many years, 70 years of Soviet Union's existence, was because of the communism, the ideology of communism. All these states, 15 states of Soviet Union with different culture, different religion, different background, were integrated together because communism was the ideology. There was no religion that time. In fact, communism was the religion. But in a global setup, you can never have an ideology. It's challenging, difficult. The other option is religion. All these points which I mentioned as part of the 8 Noble Truth, many of it is valid and relevant in every religion. Compassion, charity, forgiveness, non-violence, ahimsa, everything is there. But then not everybody is religious. According to research, 16% of the world comprises people who are non-religious or atheists. And this is a sort of a conservative figure, so it will be around 20%. So in any case, 20% people are out. So if you use a religious platform, you cannot reach out to the 20%. You're just reaching out to the 80%. So it's a tough call. It's a tough call. And here I don't have an answer to this. But the only thing, while practicing Buddha Dhamma, and as Geshe Damdul ji has mentioned, emphasizing on education, it is a generation which we have to create. You cannot start with politicians or educationists at the moment. You have to start a generation. We had a media conclave some time back based on Buddha Dhamma, and we had a correspondent from Russia, from this paper called Pravda, very famous, a lady, war correspondent, very aggressive. She's been to war zones everywhere, from Iraq, Syria to Afghanistan. And she was new and fresh to this concept of Buddha Dhamma and teachings of the Buddha. So she met me one-to-one and she asked me, she said that, I just don't understand, your whole concept of Buddha Dhamma, because you think if I put Putin and from Russia and Zelensky from Ukraine face to face and make them do meditation and do some teaching and all, the war will get over. So I said, it doesn't happen like that. It's not magic. It has to be, we have lost the race. I mean, they cannot be trained now. They've got a corrupted mind. We have to train a generation. This is an example which you have to quote and train generations, from childhood. People who groom up and become responsible citizens, they will then implement these value systems. Of course, she went back and wrote a very positive article. That's a different thing. But this is something from the school education system we have to implement. And wherever I go, I strongly propose and suggest practice of Vipassana. It is something which really purifies the mind, and it is the mind which is the creator of everything which is negative in this world. After all, it is a human being. We are the creators. I mean, this table, this chair, this mic, the car, the arrogance, the ego, the anger, it is our creation. It is our creation. It is the human mind. Mind and the brain work together. The mind influences the brain and the brain releases the action. So this is where you are. We have created it. So Vipassana in that sense purifies the mind. A practice, if possible, in schools, in colleges, in a subtle way, soft way, without forcing people, will certainly create a new generation of people. The government of Maharashtra has realized the relevance of this, and they give government employees 10 days leave a year to practice Vipassana. Obviously, it's worked out fine somewhere. And there are some schools where Vipassana is being practiced, and the kids there have performed exceptionally well compared to anywhere that you go in any corner of the world. Not much splash about Vipassana as everywhere else, but there is Vipassana everywhere in remotest of places. I have traveled to some places where I would never think there is, Vipassana present, because I was addressing a crowd which was new to. It was an interreligious kind of a conference where Buddha Dhamma had very less role to play. Those people are not aware of Buddhism at all. But while I was about to talk to them, I just checked on Google, and that small city in a remote place had about 7 centers. And I had to tell them, the crowd, that in your city you have 7 centers, and they were a bit surprised. So, in the IBC, in the organization which I represent, our effort is to push this narrative everywhere possible, especially in countries abroad, through our partners. We have almost about 37 countries which are members of IBC, and beyond that, of course, several other partners that we have. Our intention is to push this narrative through various channels, and this year in 2025, the next year, we are trying to work out a kind of a global network on Vipassana, make people aware and conscious, and eventually, if we have the support of the government, it's a tall claim, but we may be able to, in a year, 2 years, whatever, get the United Nations to declare a Vipassana Day, just like the Yoga Day. I hope with your blessings we will succeed in that. That will certainly change the world in a major way in terms of universalizing ethics. Thank you very much. Namaste.